Hello everyone. In this video, we will be uploading our dedicated Linux server to Amazon EC2. Now, if you still need to build a dedicated server or cross-compile for Linux, please have a look at my previous videos. For this tutorial, we will need an AWS account. If you haven't already registered for one, follow this guide before continuing. The link to this will be in the description below. If you're following along with my dedicated server tutorial series, we will first need to go back into our UE5 project and add a text input for our main menu. Open up your project in the Unreal editor. Once your project is open, double-click on the WBP main menu widget. In the main menu, we want to add a text box. This is so the user can input the IP address for the server that we will host on Amazon EC2. I want to make the foreground color to black, as well as the focus foreground color to black. Then I want the default text to be 127.0.0.1, which is the address for localhost. And this is preference, but I like to center align the text. So you notice our vertical box, our contents is kind of spilling out of our vertical box. So let's go to the vertical box and resize Y. There we go. Let's rename the text box. So now is editable text box IP for the IP address, and make sure the is variable checkbox is checked. Now let's head over to the graph editing mode. For our button on click action, instead of hard coding in our localhost IP address, we want to grab the text input from the editable text box IP. So control click grab that variable into the graph, pull out from that pin, and the node we want is get text. From that text node, we want toString. And from the string, we want to append the port number, which is :7777. Then you can attach the return value to the level name, which will convert it to a name variable. Go ahead and compile and save. And now we will need to rebuild the Linux server. So go ahead and package the Linux server. Since this is an incremental build, it shouldn't take very long. Now we also need to repackage the Windows client. So under Platforms, Windows, select third-person client or your project name with the client suffix, and under Build Target. And make sure the binary configuration is Development or Use Project Settings, and package your client. Once packaging is complete, go ahead and close out of the UE5 editor. In your web browser, navigate to aws.amazon.com and sign in to the console. Once you're signed into AWS, click on the Services drop-down, go to Compute, click on EC2, or type in EC2 in the search bar to get to the EC2 Management Console. Now, before we launch an instance, make sure you're in the region that you want to be in. In the States, there are 4 main regions. I chose Ohio since it is the region closest to where I'm physically located, but you could choose whichever region you wish. Now click on Launch Instance. For the server name, I'll say UE5 test. We'll leave it as Amazon Linux for the operating system. Then we'll leave the instance type as T2 Micro, which is free tier eligible. And for the key pair, we can go ahead and create a new key pair. And we want to use the .pem file. I'll go ahead and name this key pair UE5 test. And as you've noticed, the key pair will be automatically downloaded to your downloads folder. Make sure you don't misplace this key pair. So now we'll need to edit the network settings. For security group name, I'll type in UE5 tests, but feel free to name it according to your naming conventions. Then I'll also add an inbound security group rule for our UE5 server. So we want custom UDP. The port range will be 7777. The source will be anywhere. I'll go ahead and change the description to UE5 tests as well. Now that's done, go ahead and click Launch Instance. Then you can either click on this instance ID or instances to see all the instance currently running in this region. So now we want to wait until the instance state is running and the status check is 2 out of 2. In the meantime, let's go and ensure that we have OpenSSH installed. To make sure that you have OpenSSH installed, right click on the start menu, go to settings, click on apps, optional features, and on this list make sure you have OpenSSH client. If you don't have the SSH client, click add a feature and select the OpenSSH. While we're still waiting, let's go ahead and move that PEM file from our downloads folder into our build folder. Before we actually use this PEM file, we will need to change some permissions on it. So right click on that PEM file, select properties. In the security tab, click on advanced, disable inheritance, remove all inherited permissions on this object, and then click add. For principal, you'll need to add your Windows user. So type in your Windows username, select check name, and click OK. Now for this user, we want full control. Apply, OK, and close out of properties. Now let's head back to our EC2 console. 2 out of 2 checks passed. So now we know our Linux instance is up and running. We want to take note of that public IPv4 address. So let's take a copy of that. Back in your builds folder, we want to zip up the Linux server. So right click using your archive utility, zip up that build folder, or if you don't have 7-zip, you can also select send to and use the Windows default file archiver. Back in our build folder, in the Explorer address bar, type in cmd to open a command prompt in the current directory. Now we'll upload our LinuxServer.zip file into our EC2 instance. The command to do that is scp-i followed by our UE5 test.pem file, followed by the name of our Linux server zip file, followed by EC2-user, and you must type this exactly as shown, @ and then paste in the IP address of our EC2 instance, followed by colon and the tilde symbol. You'll see a prompt about the authenticity of the host, to which we'll just type in yes to continue connecting. Once your dedicated server build has finished uploading, we can go back to the EC2 console. Click on your instance and click connect. For the connection type, we will be using EC2 Instance Connect, and the username will be EC2 user. Once we're in the home directory of your EC2 instance, type in ls-la to make sure that our LinuxServer.zip has in fact been uploaded. So now we want to unzip it. Now we need to change the permissions for the Linux server directory. The command for that is chmod plus x dash r then the name of the Linux server directory. So to start your server, simply type in the full path to the server shell script, which is LinuxServer / name of your project with the server suffix .sh. Alright, now our server's up and running. Back in your build folder, open up the client build, then start a command prompt in the current directory. Now we want to launch a client in windowed mode. The command to do that is simply your project name with the client suffix .exe-windowed. And in the text input, clear out the IP address for localhost and paste in the public IP address for our dedicated server hosted on EC2. Once we click login, you could see our server logs processing, and we have successfully connected a Windows client to a Linux dedicated server hosted remotely on a cloud service. So now I'll launch another client using the same command and repeat the same steps for a second Windows client. And there we have it. 2 Windows client connected to a Linux dedicated server hosted on Amazon EC2. Once you finish testing your dedicated server on EC2, make sure to go back to the EC2 console and terminate your instance. Otherwise, you'll continue incurring charges with AWS. This will conclude my Unreal Engine 5 dedicated server tutorial series. If there's any other tutorial you'll like to see, feel free to drop them in the comments. Until next time, thank you for watching.